In a previous video, I covered the uses of team tracks, which will work in all sizes of cities, but what if we are actually not modeling a small city, but we're modeling a much larger area and want to be able to maintain that illusion of a much larger area on our model railroad? And there are certain industry types that work well to help achieve that, and these are going to be terminal industry. We're going to cover them in this video today. The first would be the stock pens. Most large city yards had stock pens on the fringes of them, either for loading pigs, sheep, cattle into cars or offloading. Or there were car loading rules for animals. They could only be a certain number of hours in a stock car. So sometimes they would have to be the cars would have to be unloaded so the animals could get fed and watered before reloading. That's one of the reasons why most stock car shipments tend to be a bit shorter. And these stock pens can be of any size, and I'm trying to model here in Portland, Oregon. There only was a couple pens. However, if you're modeling an area with a much larger concentration of like sheep and cattle, like you might find in the Midwest, then these stock pens will be much larger. Especially like the famous Chicago auction yards, those were gigantic stock pens because those were connected directly to the meat packing houses. And relatively common, however, most stock pens services which died out in the early 1970s. The second type is the icing dock. From the beginning of the refrigerator car era to the end of the ice reefer era in the early 1970s, these cars would all generally require icing before being delivered to customers. So the advantage of icing docks is this allows an extra step in your operations, where refrigerator cars could be unloaded at a destination, and then the switcher would deliver the cars to the icing dock, and then delivered from the icing dock to customers for reloading. And there are some caveats here as well. As I mentioned, generally this lasted only into 374 or so, when most of it was discontinued. Size here can be varying here. I only have 4 or 5 cars on this particular dock, but these docks were typically double-sided, so you might seeing a dozen cars, 2 dozen cars could easily be accommodated. Also, not every icing dock had an ice plant or an ice manufacturing house. Some were just a dock, and the ice was delivered. It was delivered to the ice house from another location. Sometimes there was an ice plant that actually made the ice, and that was typically limited to, I would say, the large cities where you had a lot of volume. Sometimes the ice was delivered, from outside sources, or it might have been, iced by truck. So a lot of times, the size of the plant will kind of determine your overall area. So you want to have, for a big city, you're going to want to have a ice plant of some sort connected to the docks in order to serve a large quantity of refrigerator cars. The third type would be intermodal trailer on flat car type docks. In the mid 1950s, these trailers were unloaded in a circus style arrangement, which means the tractors were backed up the ramp and they basically pulled trailer off one at a time, which means they were also loaded in reverse. They'd be backed back down the train and then loaded on one at a time, which obviously took time to do that. Once the larger cars appeared in the from the later 50s and the mid 60s, most trailers were unloaded by gantry cranes. and not by circus style. And then, of course, later years, the use of container on flat car has outpaced trailer on flat car, especially with the advent of double stacks in the 1980s. So generally, for a city terminal, again, you could have a flat car ramp like this, and easily having long flat cars ready to be loaded or unloaded, and or a small intermodal yard, I should say, or with a gantry crane that might do what would be appropriate for your any periods going forward, 60s, 70s, up to today. So for a modern era terminal, some sort of intermodal facility is pretty much a must. For last major type, generally would be a freight house, freight forwarder, or an express building like this one here, simulating for the Railway Express Agency. You'll see you can see any type of equipment here. Baggage cars, baggage express cars. With a lot of them will have the baggage, the Railway Express Agency logos on them. You may also see express box cars, express refrigerator cars like this one here. And this will allow any type of equipment, because these were high value merchandise or priority merchandise or perishable merchandise that would be delivered from the railroad and eventually submitted onto trucks for delivery to local areas. For freight houses and uses of less than carload loading, this is another thing that generally, kind of like the icing dock and the stock pens, lasted into the mid 1970s, or so. Yeah. Combinations of all of these, with the stock pens and intermodal ramps, icing docks, freight houses, all of these will help you and maintain that illusion of a big city terminal. So if you like this kind of content, please give me a like, or please consider subscribing.